Hello, welcome to Footprint. My name is Samuel Atamensa. Um, in this episode, we are just here to have another conversation with Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante, which episode we started a while back. And so if you are watching or listening to us, you actually have missed a chunk of the conversation, but never mind. There's this book that I have introduced to you, which is the critical and biographical essays of Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante. Critical and biographical essays of Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante. My little glance through this book would suggest to me that is a book is a must read for every Ghanaian. And if you are non-Ghanaian and you want to understand the makeup of Ghana, the context of a lot of our conversations, the background to some of the personalities and their roles they played, I think this is the book. And this book, I don't know what I can do, but some way, somehow, the Ghana Education Service must find a way of pushing this book somewhere. I don't know where. I'm not an educationist. But look, I am so impressed with everything about this book, the content, the packaging, the writing, and the essence of this book, that Nana S.K.B. Asante is actually in his 90s now, but very healthy and very strong. Many years, long years after he's gone, this book will still speak volumes. So we better preserve it. All right, so you missed, but you haven't missed. You know where to go. Legon Bookshop, EPP Bookshop, wherever you find it. And I'm sure it's online, available online. Is that right? Yes, available online. Please get it, and you will come and find me and thank me later. Nana, good to have you again.
Not at all. Very good.
So in our first episode, we talked about your schooling, your experiences, the people you met, and leaving Ghana, coming back into Ghana, going from England to Yale and back into Leeds, and you left Leeds, and your foray into the international
Yes.
career would start with the World Bank.
That's correct.
Where exactly?
1966 at the Washington, D.C.
Okay.
as the headquarters of the
Oh,
World
okay.
Bank,
So
yes.
you operated from the
Yes, I was
headquarters.
admitted to the legal department of the World Bank. I was, in fact, the first African from south of Sahara to be appointed to the legal department. There were only 25 lawyers at that time. I gather there are over 200 now. And, and the head was somebody called Dr. Aaron Brokes. And it was really a very collegial group. But the World Bank experience was critical in my career development because it introduced me to international business transactions. You know, before I went to the World Bank, there was a coup and Nkrumah had been ousted. And when you read the Legon Observer, there was a series of articles, what went wrong. Some of the things which are supposed to have gone wrong were improperly negotiated international business transactions, like supplier credits. And it occurred to me that this was an opportunity to get the hang of that. So it introduced me to international finance, international business transactions, but more particularly to various development projects in various countries. We did infrastructure projects in various countries, Kenya and so forth. I could go on, mention a number of projects, but I want to mention one particular project which sums up quite a bit of my World Bank experience. This was in 1968, more than half a century ago. The World Bank and the IFC, International Finance Corporation, an affiliate of the World Bank, and 9 private banks from the West collaborated with the government of South Korea in establishing what was known as the Korea Development Finance Corporation, which was to play a critical role in providing a facility for attracting Western capital to the industrialization of Korea.
So this was Korea, South Korea, North?
Korea South.
Okay.
Korea South, South Korea. So we went to Seoul.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asked to go. When I was told to go, I was a little reluctant because, and I even took tropical clothes. And they said, you are going to Korea in February 1960. It's a temperate climate, it's winter there.
Yeah.
So we went. And our mission was to examine all the conditions of effectiveness, as they would say, the conditions for implementing the loan, which the various entities had provided for the establishment of this.
So this was the World Bank team, which
yes,
you
that was
were
it. I represent the World Bank, but the World Bank affiliate was there, the IFC, International
and
Finance.
then
The 9 private banks were participants.
Banks.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So
at this time,
yes.
Korea had not, if you like, developed.
No, that's the point of my my remembering. No, it hadn't developed. What I saw was a lot of construction going on. A lot of construction was going on, a lot of activity, but it was not developed anywhere near. And later on, World Bank studies have shown that at that time, the Koreans made the education a critical component of their development strategy. And they concentrated on primary school in the 1960s, secondary school in the 1970s, so that in the 1970s, every Korean worker had secondary school education. And then in the 1980s, on tertiary education. And when I compare the Korea that I saw at that time with the Korea that emerged even 30 or 40 years afterwards, Korea became the 12th largest economy of the world. Korean students in mathematics and science are among the top in the OECD countries. Korea has developed high technology and so forth. It's one of the Asian tigers. It's something which impresses me because at that time the per capita income of Korea was no higher than that of Ghana. And so that is one mission which I remember very graphically. The World Bank also made me realize the relationship between, the efficiency of the public system and development projects. I dealt with projects in China, not in the World Bank, I beg your pardon, in Singapore and Malaysia. China came much later on. And the efficiency with which these projects were executed were very satisfactory. Was very satisfactory to the World Bank. Discipline, high dedication, meritocracy, all these things were features that I saw.
Discipline, high dedication,
yes.
meritocracy.
Yes.
These three words can never be found in the Ghanaian dictionary. Now, he spoke about Korea, more details in this book.
Yeah.
People, I'm not selling books here, but I'm just telling you that for your own good as a Ghanaian, you should read. It will help you.
Yes.
So, sir, please
So, from the world, I went to a number of missions. That's Korea. I went to Nairobi and.
How was Nairobi like at the time?
Nairobi was beautiful. Yeah, in those days.
Well, they had a lot of Western influence.
Oh yes, Nairobi was created by the English. It was, a beautiful legacy of the English, the colonial authorities, the British, I beg your pardon. It is just beautiful, yeah. But unfortunately, if you went beyond Nairobi to the outskirts, then you saw.
You saw the real
places,
Kenya.
the real thing. Some places called Jericho. And it was terrible. The contrast was shattering, yes. But the center of Nairobi. And incidentally, talking of people that I met in my way, I lived in the same house in West London when I was with Mwai Kibaki.
Mwai Kibaki?
Yes, the one who became president of Kenya.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So, and he became a Minister of Finance for Kenya when I was in the World Bank. So I knew him. I also knew the first two Africans to be trained as lawyers from what was then Northern Rhodesia, that is Zambia. Somebody called Mainza Chona, who became Prime Minister, and somebody called Fitzpatrick Chula, who became Attorney General.
Wow.
When I visited Zambia years afterwards, Chona invited me to the 25th anniversary of his wedding, you know.
Wow. Wow.
So it was a very enriching experience, the World Bank. And it was the main basis for my appointment as Solicitor General in Ghana.
So how long were you with the World Bank?
3.5 years.
3.5 years.
Yes, yes.
So like in your fourth year,
yes,
you had an invitation to come back to Ghana.
Yeah, 1969.
Okay.
Yes.
Was it after the Busia thing or?
No, this was during the Busia.
No, what I'm saying is that after
the
Busia
beginning.
took over.
Yes.
Became Prime
yes,
Minister.
after Busia became Prime Minister, he invited me. Yeah. I came for an interview.
Did you know him before?
A little.
Or you knew about him?
No, I knew him, but I had corresponded with him. Yes,
Okay, lawyer to lawyer, so.
Well, Busia wasn't a lawyer.
Oh, he wasn't?
No.
Is Dankwa who was a lawyer?
Anga was a lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah, Busia was a social
lecturer.
anthropologist.
Yeah,
That's right. So I knew him. He had actually given a lecture to the Plato Club at Achimota School when I was a student. These were the people that we knew growing up. And Nkrumah came as a new phenomenon altogether and swept them all away.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah,
of course. You lived through the story. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I was appointed Solicitor General then. So I became Solicitor General. But I recall one incident. When I became I was appointed Solicitor General, there were, many colleagues, and even those who were not colleagues were delighted. They threw parties in my honor and all the rest and so forth. I was going to take up a major role in the legal sector of Ghana. But there was one colleague from Argentina who, dissented. He said, Sam, as they used to call me, you have got a permanent position at the World Bank. The terms are good. Even they go to the extent of providing you with assistance for the education of your children. Why are you going to unstable Africa? I dismissed it. Oh, everything is going to be rosy, we have a new constitution and so forth. This was in September 1969. But I came within barely 2.5 years. There was a coup, a champion's coup. And I remember him a lot. So whenever there's something happens in Africa, I remember.
But tell me, Solicitor General
Yes.
and Attorney General, what's the difference? We don't know.
Yes, well, the Attorney General is the head.
Okay.
Traditionally, the Solicitor General from the public service used to be the number 2 before the creation of Deputy Attorney General.
Okay.
So I was number 2 then. Eventually.
So do I take it that then the Solicitor General would be expected to be the technocrat?
Even what?
The technocrat.
Yes.
Okay.
Very much the technocrat. Yes. Although the Attorney General too had to get some professional expertise, but he was the technocrat and the civil servant, whereas the Attorney General was a political appointee. At some stage in my career, I became Deputy Attorney General, not because I became a politician, but there was some question about the position of the Solicitor General, and they clarified it by making me Deputy Attorney General. This was a champion's time. Here was I, appointed Solicitor General,
Under Buzia.
And under Buzia, and Buzia is ousted.
And who was the Attorney General at the time?
At that time, at that particular time, it was Victor Usu.
Victor Usu,
Yes.
right.
It was Victor Usu. At that particular time, the first Attorney General was Adade, NYB Adade, when I was appointed. By the time Buzia's coup took place, it was Victor Usu. A new Attorney General was appointed in Champon's regime. That was Ian Moore.
Okay.
So I was Solicitor General when he was appointed Attorney General. But of course, Champon was not happy about my being there. He supposed, saw me on the official list. Oh, is this man still around? That kind of thing. And somebody pointed out that I was a civil servant. I said, all right. He was still not happy, but they realized that my expertise was necessary. This international negotiations, this was the time that we were negotiating, rescheduling the Ghana's external debt, we were acquiring equity in mineral enterprises, mining enterprises, and I was needed for that part. So I was kept on, and I actually stayed from 1972 till 1977.
Oh, that was the entire...
Almost
span.
entire,
Yeah.
but at that time, the relationship between me and the Champon had gone to such a state that I thought, first of all, I was going to establish my own private practice in Accra. And then I went to a conference which resulted in an offer being made to me to go and work as the chief legal advisor of the United Nations Center on Transnational Corporations. So,
hang on, before we get there, you know, there's this thing about Kutua Champon and Yintia. Yintia, what's your own...
well, I was very much involved in the Yintia.
What was it about? Because we hear that we just refused to pay the loans that we have.
Yes. It's an interesting thing, you know. When Nkrumah's government was ousted, there was indebtedness arising from what is known as supplier credits that had been negotiated during his regime. This was the time when, I consider them sharp companies, companies with some dubious reputation descended upon Ghana. And the supplier credit was such that they conceived of the project. They said they would pre-finance the project, and then you had to undertake to repay the credit within a very short time, say 5 years or something. Nkrumah was then strapped for financing from the external world, and so many of these were accepted. It turned out that the contractors were not very good performers. Some of them, contracts were a little tainted by illegal consideration, but in any case, they did not perform well. They were not viable projects to generate resources to amortize the loan.
The loan, yeah.
So when NRC came into power, it was faced with this, and they started by asking for terms for rescheduling the repayment of these loans. So they had one rescheduling agreement in 1966 and another in 1968. These rescheduling agreements were not helpful. They always did not reschedule the whole amount, only a part. And then there was a very short consolidation period, and they would charge heavy moratorium interest. And so debt, increased from that. They did it twice, 66 and 68. Buzia came in 69. He wanted to also reschedule. Even getting the world, the Westerners, to come to the negotiating table was a big thing. We tried it in London under the leadership of J.H. Mensah, and it did not work. They did not concede anything. They were very reluctant, and they gave us more of the same. So when Champon took power, he wanted to adopt a radical attitude, you know. And I had also, in my own professional field, wondered whether we couldn't challenge at least that part of the indebtedness which was supposed to be tainted by some illegal consideration or which had not been well performed. The difficulty in that was that, you know, the contractors took the precaution of taking negotiable instruments from the Ghana government or Bank of Ghana. So these negotiable instruments were passed on to people to whom they sort of discounted this debt, so that the new owners became holders in due course. And the new owners were the credit guarantee agencies, like Exim Bank of the US, like ECGD of UK, like Hermes of Germany. And so in law, it was very difficult to challenge them because the obligations of the contractors all disappeared. They were holders in due course. They were not responsible if they did the contractor did anything wrong. So we really were faced with this thing. There was no sympathy. And so the position that was adopted, and I claim responsibility for providing that strategy, was that that component of the debt which was vitiated by illegal consideration or other factors would be challenged. And of course, we were advised that we should always say that we are prepared to go to international arbitration. So that was added. And then the rest, which was free from this taint, would be paid on IDA terms, that's 50 years grace period and so forth. So that was the Yentuya statement. It was a mechanism of trying to get, you know.
So it wasn't a blanket position of we will not pay our loans.
No, it wasn't a blanket position, but it was a challenge, which of course had not been entertained by the Western the creditors before. And I thought my strategy was that it gave the government the sort of the upper hand in the negotiation, because they then went to the World Bank to ask them to come and negotiate with us. And eventually we negotiated a long-term settlement.
Wow.
28 years period, very well limited. Instead of 6 years, 6% moratorium interest, 2.5% and so forth, and a grace period of 10 years. Yeah.
All right. So you are listening to Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante. Now you've heard for the first time the explanation regarding this Yentuya, which is attributed to Kutua Champon, where people say that Kutua Champon, when he came, he looked at the loan sheet and said that Yentuya Abrofo Norman Franso. Now you get the context. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we launch deep into his UN career. This is Footprint. Okay, welcome back. This is Footprint. And I have Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante telling his story, a wonderful story, and so engaging. And these are not stories you read by the fireside, or you don't just get them anywhere. They are unique and they are profound. And if you are fortunate to be watching or listening, trust me, you won't hear it anywhere again. Nana, thank you once again.
You're welcome.
So you are still with the World Bank, and
Yes.
World Bank would have taken you through places, and then you came back to help Kutua Champon.
Yes.
You know,
Buzia first. And then
Buzia and then Buzia, and then that's also extended
Yes.
to Achampon. While you were there, you had something to do with the then Ashanti Gold Fields.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
yes.
During the Champon regime.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Can
correct.
you narrate your
Yes. Well, a Champon proclaimed a philosophy of self-reliance. And he said that this self-reliance dictated that we should participate effectively in all sectors of the economy, and that it was incompatible with this philosophy to have the mining companies entirely owned and controlled by foreign companies. Not only the mining companies, but the forestry companies. So the idea he promulgated a policy of acquiring 55% equity interest in all foreign-owned mining companies and all foreign-owned timber companies. I was supportive of this from technical and policy grounds, and I was the chairman of the team that led the team that actually negotiated the acquisition of 55%. Everything was not done by negotiation. At a certain stage, we were aided by legislation, decree. But the effect of this policy and the work that we did as a negotiating team and a technical team, we had members like Kwesi Rena, members like Texan, who was Commissioner for Income Tax. Kwesi Rena was head of the Aluminum Industries Commission, government geologist at first. There was a private lawyer who was retained for, who joined our team. That's Obeda Samoa. Yes. And the officials from the Attorney General's Department, apart from myself, that's C.K. Anson, and a university lecturer in geology, whose name escapes me right now. We also had the benefit of a UL consultant called Charles Lepton. The Ghana government had tried to get 20% equity, for example, in Ashanti Goldfields under the NLC, but the benefits were minimal. So this 55 was a real thing. There was resistance. The agency was then owned by Lonro, and you had Tiny Roland, people like that in the business. So eventually, we succeeded in acquiring 55% equity.
So which you paid money for?
Yes, there was that was the issue. There was a formula for compensation which was not readily accepted by Lonro. But Lonro said that they will continue to work in the meantime. It was a liability of the Ghana government. And also, it was provided that Lonro would provide the management, but the deputy should be a Ghanaian appointed by the Ghana government. The person whose name I was trying to remember was Lloyd Kwashe. He was a member of the negotiation team. Eventually, he was appointed the first deputy managing director of Ashanti Goldfields. He was succeeded by Sam Jonah. Okay. He was appointed first by the Ghana government as deputy managing director. But Lonro was smart enough. Eventually, they appointed him. Lonro appointed him as managing director. And that's how he became managing director of AGC. So, AGC, then CAS. CAS is Consolidated African Selection Trust.
That's Akwetia.
That was also
was part of it.
Yes, we had acquired 55% interest. A manganese company and yes, and also another company, not manganese, but the bauxite.
The bauxite
company. And then we acquired 55% of the timber companies, MIM and others. One of the principal officials who joined me in doing that is the late Frank Beecham. So this was all done.
The lawyer?
The lawyer's father.
Okay.
Lawyer's father, that's Frank Beecham.
I was a bit scared when you said the late.
I work with with a lawyer on the Judicial Committee
Oh,
Council. Yeah.
right.
So I thought it was a very significant thing because it was the first time. It wasn't the first time, certainly in Ghana, but the example has been set elsewhere. Sierra Leone acquired 51% of the equity in the diamond mine.
Mines, yeah.
Zambia acquired 51%
Copper.
of the copper mine
mines,
and so
yeah.
forth and so on. And this was the trend. Of course, this was the time of the new international economic order when developing countries had thought that they were coming their own and were trying to make an impact in the management of their own sectors. Unfortunately, things did not work out too well. And as we speak now, the Ghana government doesn't have a cent, doesn't have a single share in Ashanti Goldfields.
What happened to that share?
They sold. Successive Ghana governments sold their part of the equity.
In return for what?
In return for what is a very related question. In return for what? Maybe some money for budgetary support, some ephemeral thing. In any way, either directly or on their stock exchange, they have changed, over a number of years.
Yeah.
Until right now, I think I'm confident in saying that Ghana government doesn't have a single share in Ashanti Goldfields. I don't know what the position is as far as caste and other.
Caste is gone.
It's gone.
It's been cast away.
You have followed that, okay.
Because I go to caste, I go to Akwetia, and I look
Yes,
at caste with
Yes.
painful memories of what it
Yes.
used to be.
Yes.
With the
Is
hospital,
it because the
clinic.
resources got exhausted or what? The
Well,
natural-
actually, it's difficult. My understanding is that it's difficult to even get a buyer because the resources actually got depleted.
Okay. All right.
That's what. But Galamsey is
Anyway.
rife there.
Still going on.
Yeah.
Yes. So that is, and I wrote an article when I joined the United Nations on international mineral agreements.
So you resigned from the position of
Yes.
Solicitor General
Yes,
before Akufu took over.
that is so.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Before
But
Akufu took
you survived the union government.
And the
election?
union government was about the time that I left. I
Okay.
left in July 1977.
77,
Yes,
yeah.
about the time.
This was just when the union government
Yes,
was
yes.
all over the
I left,
place.
yes. I was told by the lady of Ghana that the people on the chamber were still not happy about me because I was protesting.
You were told by who?
Dr. Gardiner.
Oh, Dr. Gardiner.
The
yeah.
reason why the sort of
He was also a commissioner or something.
Yes, he was a commissioner. The reason why the disaffection actually continued was that as a result of what went on in the Nkrumah era, we set up something called the Public Agreements Review Committee, which was at first well received by the Champon regime, NRC. This Public Review Committee consisted of a number of very senior officials. The Solicitor General, I was chairman, but it had the Chief Commissioner of Income Tax. It had the Accountant General. It had the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana. It had Mary Chinwe Hersey, from the Ministry of Finance. It had S.K.B. Asante from the Ministry of Trade. The idea was that no agreement would be passed by the Atma Authority without review and vetting by this committee. And of course, we did our work, and sometimes we criticized and said you shouldn't do this or you should do that. That became a problem. And because I was very much involved in the establishment of this committee. I was the chairman, and Jampon's phrase was that this man is always opposing agreement. So I said, well, this is the time to leave. And but before I left, I had an opportunity to speak to him and say that when we oppose, we are trying to safeguard the national interest. And unfortunately, he did not listen. And when he was ousted, some of the things that he rejected were cited against him, you know, kind of advice. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's how I left.
Okay,
yeah.
so
And from there I
Ghana,
went to the United Nations. Yeah.
UN straight in New York.
Yes. I had attended a meeting in Addis Ababa, which was trying to determine the position of African countries in a new idea of organizing the code of conduct to regulate multinational corporations or transnational corporations. I was elected chairman of this conference. The conference was organized by the head of the United Nations Center on Transnational Corporations, which is a new organization. And I offered my CV to the chairman and said, I'm going to establish a law firm, private law firm in Ghana, and I will welcome some consultancies. Well, instead of offering me some consultancies, he said, come and be my senior legal advisor. Eventually, they called it chief legal advisor. That's how I went.
Oh, to the UN?
Yes, to the UN.
So you joined at a senior level already?
Yes, very much so.
When you got there, how many Ghanaians did you encounter within the UN system?
I cannot count
okay, but prominent
all of them,
names,
but there were some members. In my department, there were only two, but Kofi Annan at that time was a middle-level officer, was in P4.
So in terms of rankings, you were ahead of him.
Well, mine was what we call the technical thing. You know, it was not a direct.
Not a career.
Yes,
progression.
Not a career. That's right. Yeah. So, but you could say that. But actually, I was appointed director before he was appointed director.
Okay.
A few months, but then he progressed
through the ranks.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So at the UN, you had some interesting missions as well while you were there.
Yes.
And the one that excites me is about the role you played in your visit to China.
Yes. One of the most interesting projects that I worked on was my visit to China.
Mm.
Now, China at that time, and is still a communist country, you know, but they made a deliberate policy under Deng, the leader, the Chinese, to liberalize their economy by establishing an open door policy for the admission of foreign investment. But the Chinese were very methodical. They didn't just say, here we are. Once they promulgated that policy, they went about methodically inviting various international organizations and even private firms and so forth to come and tell them about this phenomenon of foreign investment, negotiating with international transactions, negotiating international transactions, or negotiating with transnational corporations. And that's how they came to invite the UNCTC. And so I and my colleagues went to China in 1980, where we were asked to first of all to produce a comprehensive report on the phenomenon of transnational corporations, the financial, the legal, and other aspects. And then it was followed by a series of projects, how to put together their petroleum legislation, how to put together a more elaborate framework for dealing with foreign companies.
So these are things you helped craft.
Absolutely.
For the Chinese
For the Chinese. There's no question about that. I have letters from the Chinese thanking me. Also thanking the United Nations. Yeah. I went there about 3 or 4 times in 1980, 81, and eventually in 1992. Yes. And there were so many. They received as many as over 30 projects from us. And in 1988, they acknowledged this in, I think I've quoted that in the book, that you have done this and that, we thank you. You made our open door policy effective and so forth. And look at where they are.
Look at where they are. Bob Marley says that in the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty.
And I was reading a report by the Kofi Annan Foundation on mining agreements. And the Chinese have gone beyond everybody in terms of the complexity of these transactions, combining aid with, commercial and other things. And then others are complaining, why are they doing that? But they are right ahead. Yes. So it always impressed me, these Asians, how methodical, how indisciplined. I mean, I don't know what they thought of Africans, but once I was there, they bowed and, all the rest of it, and were prepared to absorb whatever information you were prepared. And kept coming for more, kept coming for 10 years.
But isn't that interesting?
Yes.
The man who has gone to help China is sitting in Ghana, and we are dancing bobobo. We are just happy people, just jumping around, holding one another's neck and going nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, we'll take a short break. We'll come back and see how he eventually came to help craft the constitution that we are enjoying today. This is Footprint with Nana S.K.B. Asante. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Footprint. I am Samuel Atamensa, and I have with me Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante, a name that you probably may have heard over and over, but this is our first real encounter with him. And also, your foray into another level of foreign service with the UN, and then with the several missions and interventions, eventually you came back to Ghana.
Correct.
Was it after retirement?
Yes.
Okay, so you retired at the UN.
Yes.
And then came back to Ghana.
Yeah.
Now, chief among the activities that you've been involved in, which really I want you to address, is your involvement in the crafting of the current constitution.
Okay.
And I don't know whether you'd want to answer. There's also the call that it has to be reviewed. It has to be reviewed. Well, human beings change and organisms change, whether it's time yet, and your own take on it. And what was your role?
All right. In 1989, I came to a conference in Accra, which was organized by the UNCTC and other bodies, particularly the Norwegian Petroleum Agency. The conference had to do with establishing petroleum regimes, the legal framework for petroleum activities. That was in 1989. In the course of that meeting, I paid a visit to two people that I knew, the late Justice Dan Annan and Captain Kojo Chikata, who were then dealing with the JNPC headed by Chachu Chikata. In the course of my interaction, I pointed out to the two gentlemen that I knew that, although economically Ghana was getting quite a good press in 1989, there was international concern about when there would be a transition to constitutional rule. This was something which was talked about all the time. So I was adding my bit to this advocacy for a return to constitutional rule. It was then that they disclosed to me that they had thought about it. There would be various stages. And then they put it to me that if they reach a particular stage when they needed my assistance, would I be willing? And I very readily said yes. Who wouldn't like to help in the transition from a military to a constitutional rule? That's how it happened. Then in 1991, they alerted me that the time had come, but I had previously indicated to them that they had to apply to the United Nations Secretary General, Perez Akoya, for him to release me. So they did apply. The United Nations did release me, and the United Nations undertook to finance my participation in this exercise.
Wow.
UNDP provided financing for paying my salary and whatever I needed to participate. So I came as a UN expert, so to speak, to assist in in,
Crafting the constitution.
in crafting the whole thing. I was appointed chairman of the committee of experts.
Remember some of the members of that committee?
Yes. You had the late Justice Annie Jaggi, a retired Court of Appeal justice, who was in fact the first woman to be appointed a High Court judge, not only in Ghana, but in the whole British Commonwealth. Yes, that was, we had the late Osiadeayo Ajimambadu, the Omanhene of Doma, who had a doctorate from Oxford on social anthropology, so he was called Osiadeayo Dr. Ajimambadu. We had the late James Chinrehese, the husband of Mary Chinrehese, very well-known, experienced legal and constitutional draftsperson. We had Kojo Afarijan, who was a political lecturer. We had Dr. Charles Jaboni, who was a lecturer in economics. We had Ebo Bensienchel, a lawyer from S.K.B. We had Mrs. Sabina Ofori-Boateng, who was the secretary member of the committee, former director of legal drafting at the Attorney General's Department. I think I've covered all of them. There were about 9 of us.
Wow.
Yes.
How you remember all these names
Yes.
is amazing.
And we all sat, we worked very hard for barely 2 months to produce the, let me just show you the report. This is the report of the Committee of Experts on proposals for a draft constitution of Ghana. Maybe you can show it.
Yeah. So here you go. This is the
Yes.
report. Okay.
Yes. So
July
those were
1991.
proposals. That's right.
I like the scripts, the fonts that were used. The font that was used is amazing. It shows its authenticity.
So this was what was submitted to the Consultative Assembly. There was a challenge. For example, we had to bring proposals of this combination of an executive president and a prime minister. There were 2 reasons that we advanced for that proposal. You know, sometimes you have a person who has the gravitas and the political appeal to become president, but he's not necessarily the best man to coordinate, you know, policy or to run the machinery of government. And so many countries have found it necessary to have a president who is the center of unity and so forth, and the hands-on administrator, the prime minister. They have it in many countries. Unfortunately, that proposal did not go well with the Consultative Assembly because they said you can't have 2 lions in a hole. You can't have 2 captains in a ship and that kind of thing. But it is significant that President Kufuor, when he was president, found it necessary to do that. And that's why he was going to appoint a prime minister, but when they said prime minister is not in the constitution, he appointed Mr. Chinrehese as the chief advisor to do more or less the same work. We also proposed a larger and more effective Council of State, which would encompass even past presidents, all key holders of office like officer commander, yes.
So were you hoping that you could get the ex-president to be, by default, a member of the Council of State?
Yes, that's right. We were. We thought we would have.
You still think it would have been a good idea?
I think a council of all elders which is the sort of image that we think of in the Council of State, should have people who have had the experience of governing the country.
Yeah.
That's what we thought anyway. Yeah, but what we wanted to really to create was a non-partisan forum
body,
for really giving, very objective advice to the president. They preferred the old form and rejected that.
So there's the conversation, I wouldn't even say a call, about the need to take a second look at our constitution. I don't know to which extent you would advocate for that or even agree to that.
This is a question which has been put to me several times. My first short answer is that by all means review it. And this is a supplementary comment. Why is it that the calls for review, which have been sustained and almost strident for the past 30 years, haven't produced a new constitution? Sometimes when people are thinking of reviewing the constitution, they fail to make a distinction between the actual words of the constitution and the conduct, the implementation of the office bearers. In my view, if you look at chapter 5 on human rights and chapter 6 on directive principle of state policy, they contain enough enough provisions to ensure good governance and to ensure the various benefits for which we set up government. If they depart from this, it's not the fault of the Constitution. There's one thing which I would also like to mention: presidential powers. We all agree that presidential powers are excessive. I think that that has a historical reason. This Constitution is a cumulative impact of all our constitutional experiences. For example, if you look at Article 57 and 58 of the 1979 Constitution, you say that most of the powers that we are complaining about are there. Article 58 actually deals with is what has become Article 71, which people complain about, about special terms and conditions for members of parliament and other officers. They are all there. You see, when they rejected some of our proposals, they were obliged by the terms of reference to look at other provisions of the other constitutions. So if you look at the Constitution, Professor Kumada has pointed out that 75 and 95% of the present Constitution are derived from either Constitution of 69 or 79.
Yeah.
So all this is there, and sometimes we have added to the presidential powers. For example, the idea that when a president comes into power, all directors or boards should cease to function. You expand the presidential power to appoint new people, and of course, in the middle of a governance, it causes dislocation, so forth and so on. So I would like all these things to be considered when they are doing the constitutional review, so that their expectations are not exaggerated. I think I've said enough on that.
You indeed have, people.
Yeah.
So you've been listening to
Yeah.
Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante tell his own story. Nana, thank you so much for making time for us today. And I will still end my conversation with Nana by talking about the book Critical and Biographical Essays by Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante. Please get this book from the Legon Bookshop. If you really are an academic, you think you are educated, you are Ghanaian, you occupy any position of responsibility, you want to go into parliament, you want to go into governance, please get this book. And not just get it to decorate your shelves. Read it. It will open your brains. It will give you proper context. And later, we'll meet and talk about it. Nana, thank you. We are grateful. And people, thank you for joining us on this episode of Footprint. My name is Samuel Atamensa. See you next week.